Hey AJ, aka Drum Chucks. How are
G'day.
ya?
I'm good, Mo, aka Pop, the psychologist.
Pop the psychologist. Well, listen,
Mm.
welcome to another episode of Songs on the Couch.
Sitting down, we're talking out, breaking it down, songs on the couch. Music and minds will figure it out, laughing and learning what it's all about. On the couch.
So tell me, AJ,
Yes.
what song are we bringing on over to the couch today?
We are bringing over a lovely classic from 1975, April of 1975.
Right?
A lovely Aussie Melbourne Victorian band of our lovely hometown called Skyhooks with their song Ego is Not a Dirty Word. Or
no,
is it?
it's not.
Or is
Well, debatable.
it? We'll talk about that.
We might get into that a little bit later, I think. But my sense of things is that it's not a dirty word, and they were on the right track. But
Although for 1975, I think it was a dirty word back then. But we'll
I
talk
think it
about
was
that.
yeah. We'll talk about that. Yeah, I think so. But anyway, tell us a little about Skyhooks. Who are these?
Ooh.
Who are these?
Ragtag.
Rapscallions. That's it, rapscallions or whatever the word is.
They call it ragtag team of of young
That's
scallywags.
That's right. Who are these? Who are these fellas?
Wow, Skyhooks, obviously formed in before 1975. So Ego is Not a Dirty Word is their second album that they released. First one, Living in the 70s, was their first official album that came out. But their second album...
What a time! What a time to be alive. The
I know.
70s.
I wish I was living in the 70s.
Well, I was. Only
Well,
just.
You were in someone's belly in the 70s.
That's true. Well, when this was released, I wasn't quite baked yet, but I was on the
Half-baked.
way. I was half baked when was it? April 1975 when this was released.
Yeah.
And but it's quite the era, one that you are still fond of and enamoured with.
Love it. Even though I wasn't even thought of. I probably wasn't. Yeah, I definitely wasn't thought of. I was in no one's mind's eye at the time. But growing up listening to this era, this decade of music in the household, I was very much heavily influenced by all genres of and all artists of all countries of that era. So right up my alley.
You were pulled into the 1970s vortex.
I was.
Because this would have been kind of the popular music at the time of your parents, maybe early teens or 20s, late teens, early 20s. And I might chuck a stat in here. I think there's some research that suggests that we don't really explore a lot of new music beyond our mid to late 20s. I think that look, I'm happy to sit in correction corner on this one for our psychotherapists, psychoanalysts, psychologists, mental health social workers, family therapists, licensed marriage and family therapists, all of the mental health crowd. If you'd like to correct me, and there is many of them, but I'm pretty sure I've seen some studies or read something about the fact that our music taste does not really expand beyond our teens and our 20s. We tend to get sort of stuck into, things of that time. Things that are was a very important time for identity formation. So if you're exposed to a particular kind of music that resonates with you and that holds a mirror up to your experiences, we kind of tend to stick with that that music. So maybe if, and you look, you know, you and I have talked about what went on in your household, and I'm sure that like a lot of things, you know, your parents' choice, what they said goes, I suppose, with what was played on the radio or the stereo in the house. So this was maybe all that you were exposed to.
It was.
Did I get that right? Is that
pretty much?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I did, obviously, you know, listeners I don't just listen to the music from the 70s, but, you know, it's funny you say that, Mo, because bands that I was listening to at that time, so when I was in my teens, early 2000s, it's funny, when they still bring out new stuff now, I find it hard to listen to their new stuff and really get into it like I did when their early stuff first came out when I was listening to it as a teen. Not all bands, but some of my favorite bands.
And what do you make of that?
Well, it's a bit of column A, column B for me. It's like you said, is it a psychology thing or is it a time to give it up, guys? Like you know, quit while you're ahead type of thing.
So maybe it's like column A is I don't really resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah, the current
anymore.
Stuff. Yeah.
I don't resonate with your current stuff anymore. And column B is like, are you making much of a contribution? Are people gonna like what you're doing? Or is it, you know, are you a bit past it? Have you got nothing new to say?
Or there's also column C, which is that they've just gone in a direction that I'm just like, well, I just like the music that you brought out when you first brought out. Like, I don't really like the new direction that you're going.
So
there's a column C. There's a column C.
I don't like where you're going. I don't like the direction of your music. Right. Okay. I'm here for it. I think that's it's all valid points, and I think we can outgrow stuff, can't we?
Oh,
this
that's
is
right.
what we do as humans. We are, I suppose, in our teens and early 20s, that's a very important time for identity formation. But we can, as humans, we do evolve and grow and move on and change, and our taste changes, and that's okay. That's all part of being human.
That's it.
I thought I was going to get into the psychology later. So I'm going to show.
What happened to taking the backseat while I was doing the interesting tidbits?
Right, I know. Well, have we got to interesting tidbits yet?
No, not yet.
Not yet. So, interesting tidbits. Right. Go ahead. Tell us about the Skyhooks.
No, I want to hear your little psychology before the psychology.
The psychology before the psychology. What's my psychology before the psychology?
Well, you
what
were
am I
going
talking about?
You were going to give us a little bit of a psychology analysis before you gave us your psychology analysis after the interesting tidbits.
Was I? I've forgotten what that was. It's fallen out of my mind. Well, I mean, I think I was talking about the identity formation, and I was talking about, you know, the importance of holding on to music of the time where our identity is developing, and holding on to music that holds a mirror up to us and validates us, and so I don't know what Skyhooks ego is not a dirty word is. Well, I think it's validating a lot of stuff for a lot of people, but we might get into that a little bit later after we learn a bit more about the band and the genre and the time. The genre and the time and the times of the 1975. So let's get into the interesting tidbits, and we'll talk about some psychology later. I'm always banging on about the psychology. I'm always jumping in with it, aren't I? I think we need to spend a little bit of time on the history of the Skyhooks and Australian. What genre? Pub rock, glam rock,
glam rock / pub rock. Well, they were doing glam rock in pubs because that's the only music venues we had back in the 70s were go down to your local pub and listen to your local band. Like there wasn't really like big music venues in Australia where all bands started out was in the pub scene. So they were starting out as the very first glam rock band of Australia.
Yeah.
in the pub scene. So
Right.
it's a bold
Were
move.
it's a bold move. I mean, let's talk about glam. What's the aesthetic? What was going on in the mid 70s with glam rock?
So glam rock is it's a style of music, but it's mainly, wearing costumes and makeup. So not just being
Right.
a band and playing music, you're actually taking on a persona. So a character of some sort,
Yeah.
whether it be with...
Which is, I was going to say, it's kind of drag, really. It's like masculine, hetero men sort of really leaning into, a kind of a style of drag, really.
Well, a little bit. When you think of glam rock, we think of David Bowie. And David Bowie was the ultimate androgynous... he was the first androgynous artist to do that with glam rock. And then you had bands like Roxy Music. These are the UK glam rock bands. So you had Roxy Music, you had David Bowie. I'm just trying to think who are the big ones.
T-Rex?
T-Rex, thank you. Genesis, they were more progressive rock, but Peter Gabriel still wore outfits and makeup, but he was more portraying those characters of those of that genre. So glam rock wasn't just; it also progressed into progressive rock as well. The outfits and the makeup personas.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of a costumey, flamboyant vibe that. We've got masculine hetero men leaning into makeup and costume and flamboyance as a means of expression.
Yeah, but it's also a way of, selling the music as well, because people go, oh, those guys have got like makeup and costumes, like Kiss. Everyone knows Kiss for their makeup and costumes,
It's a bit of a marketing gimmick.
Yeah.
It's a combo of many things. It could be a little bit of a marketing gimmick. It could be self-expression.
Yeah.
It could be a bit of shock value.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, like making yourself memorable.
Yeah, yeah. And Skyhooks actually did this for shock value. Well, to stir the pot value, because in Australia, Melbourne, well, I'm sure all the states of Australia, but we'll say, Victoria, Melbourne, very conservative back in the 70s. So, being the first glam rock band of that time would have turned a lot of heads, because before them, it was all Aussie artists trying to mimic either the UK or the US scene, so prior to Skyhooks, we had the Easy Beats, which were trying to portray the Beatles.
Yes.
They were the Australian Beatles per se. So they were the first Aussie, even the singer Shirley Strawn, they were the first band to sing with like an Aussie accent per se. Like they weren't trying to mimic like a British accent or an American singing accent. It was the first Australian singing accent.
Right.
As well as glam rock, pub rock bands in Australia. They did a lot of firsts for us, yeah.
Didn't they? So they're quite innovative.
They were very innovative, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the band. Give us some interesting tidbits. Well, so the writer, the creditor of the lyrics, Greg McCanish, he's the bass player of the band. He wrote the lyrics of this song because he was very heavily by philosophy and satire. He loves his psychology, Freud and Jung. Freud and Jung. So he is a pop psychologist.
He is a pop psychologist.
Popping off all over the psychology with the Freud and the Jung.
Yep.
Right. And I'm you know me, I'm Freuding all over everybody in this podcast. So
just Freud in your load everywhere.
Right. So, and Freud would probably have something to say about that
He would.
because
Yeah.
he was all about the sexual drives
Yep.
and anywho, but Greg was into it. Greg was reading philosophy and psychology
Yep.
and that sort of proved to be an influence of this song.
Yeah, yeah, and many of the Skyhooks songs, explored lots of different genres. Like they weren't your typical, band that just they sang about identity and repression and social norms, sexuality. They sang about like the real suburbs of Australia, which for our international listeners, they might not. They might go, oh, okay, they're singing a song about a suburb called Carlton or Toorak Cowboy, where us Melburnians would know, oh yeah, we know who, people who
Yeah.
lived in Carlton or Toorak, they're different norms of,
Yeah.
or different types of suburbs. So
Yeah.
it's
I think it's transferable across across countries, states and cities, that there's always an affluent area, there's always a kind of lower or working class area, and then there's always a bit of a ghetto, a very low class, socioeconomically challenged kind of area. So what was our point? Remember, we were talking.
they were singing. There are other songs where they were singing about certain suburbs and the
And
and the people that lived in those suburbs, or they were singing about the
this-
news, horror,
Right.
horror,
yes, they have another song. What's it called? Horror movie on
horror
on my
movie,
horror
right there on my
horror
TV.
movie.
where they're talking
Yeah,
about the
horror
6 o'clock
movie.
news, because all the news ever portrays is negative or horrific stuff. It's never about positive things or.
Yeah. Right. So let's bring it round. I think what we're saying, if we bring it round, what we're saying is that they really were influenced. They had influences in philosophy, psychology, and commented on what was socially happening at the time.
Yeah. Or not happening at the time.
Or
as
not
well.
happening. Right. Okay. So there's a lot of social commentary
Yeah.
from this band. Right. Okay. And so we're starting off with Greg, the bass player,
Yep.
who's written this particular song.
Mm-hmm.
And who else have we got in the band? What else do we need to know about these guys?
So in previous podcasts, we talked about, what happens to bands when they finish. Like, what do they just go on and do normal? Do they have normal jobs, or do they keep playing in music? So in this instance, they went off. Most of them went off and did completely different things. So Red Simons, the lead guitarist, he went and played for we call it a house band, for a TV show called Hey Hey It's Saturday. So for our international
Variety show.
For our international listeners, think of it, for America, think of it like maybe like the Tonight Show, or what's another American variety show? The Late Show, the Late Night Show.
It would have been something like that, but only once a week.
Yeah.
But for our international listeners, if you kind of happen across it on YouTube, or
Which you can,
or even
you can watch it
you
on
can,
YouTube. Yeah.
or even some of our younger Australian listeners who have never heard of this cultural phenomenon known as Hey Hey It's Saturday, be warned, it is not very politically correct. It is racist, misogynistic, homophobic. Australia's really pulled its head in since the the 80s and the 90s. Well, I think it started in the late 70s.
Yeah, it did. And it used to be a morning show on Saturday.
Right. And so Red Simons from the Skyhooks, it used to have this segment on there called Red Faces, where
Red Faces, yep.
it was a little talent
Excuse me.
segment. Bless you.
Thank you.
It was a little talent segment.
Where anyone could come in
where anyone could come in, and
show
there
off
is
their
a
talents.
historic show off their talent. There's a historic moment on Red Faces where some people dressed up in blackface, and Harry Connick Jr. was a guest judge on this Red Faces segment and called it out. Harry Connick Jr. was like, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. That's not cool. And Harry Connick Jr. really called us out as Australians on the sort of systemic racism and the casual racism and how, significant that was in our culture, and that it needed to stop. And, I'm actually really pleased to see that Harry Connick Jr. doesn't hate us. In fact, he's back in Australia doing a show on the ABC called The Piano.
I saw that yesterday.
At the moment. Yeah.
I did
which
see that
is
yesterday.
the Australian take of the British show, where there's people rock up to a public place to play the piano, and there's two pianists sitting in a side room and analysing the work of these players from all over the country.
Unknown players,
yes, unknown players. But anyway, back to Red Simons, the lead guitarist of the Skyhooks, who went on to become the grumpy house band player of the Hey Hey It's Saturday band.
More the sarcastic, everything was the sarcasms of it all.
Yes, the sarcastic, what else did he do? What else did Red go on and do?
He after Hey Hey, because Hey Hey finished in the mid-2000s, he then went on to be a radio host for our local community radio, the ABC radio.
Which is our government-funded...
not community radio.
Government-funded national radio station.
Yep.
Kind of like, I suppose, in the UK it'd be like the BBC, or in the US it'd be like PBS or something like that.
Yep.
But okay, so that was Red. What Greg go on to do? What the writer of this song go on to do?
Greg, he went on to be a board member of the APRA, the ARIAs actually, which is, once again, for our international friends, is like the Australian version of the Grammys, where we give out awards to all of our Aussie artists and acts, as well as worked on APRA, which is kind of like the government body for our copyrights and artist rights here in Australia.
Right. Yep. Okay, go Greg.
Go Greg. Shirl, unfortunately, is no longer with us. He passed away in a tragic helicopter crash back in 2001. But after Skyhooks, he became a children's performer, like television performer. Kind of like a Mr. Rogers. It's funny how like this outlandish, glam rock, pub rock artist now turns to like children's shows.
Children's television.
Television. And then after that he became, because his background is carpentry. So then he became like we have like home improvement type shows where his segment was doing like basic home improvements around your home that, the everyday person could do if they wanted to fix up their home, or, put a shelf on their wall, or, stain a window type of thing.
Right. Shirl was the guy, but unfortunately Shirley Strawn passed away. What did Shirley Strawn have an actual real name? Was Shirley Strawn? I think Shirley Strawn was a stage name, wasn't it? Because he had curly hair like Shirley Temple.
Yeah, Shirley's his nickname. His real name's Graham Strawn.
Graham Strawn,
but it's not as rock star as Shirley Strawn.
As Shirley Strawn, no, it's not. No. Okay, there you go.
There you go. And then the other two members just kept on playing music. Freddie on the drums, he joined, after Skyhooks, he joined a new wave Aussie band called The Sports. For our Aussie listeners, you'd know who The Sports are. I'm just trying to think of some of their songs. We'll get back to you on that one. I think Who Listens to the Radio is one of their songs. Who listens to the radio? That's what I gotta know. Who listens to the
Okay.
radio? Do 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 do. And then
Right.
Bob Bongo Starkey, who was the guitarist, he went on and played with, they both became session musos, studio musos, worked with jazz bands, other famous Aussie artists from the 70s who went on and kept playing as well. So they just moved around the Aussie Melbourne scene, essentially.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the history of the members of the band.
History of
Any
the members.
right? Any other interesting tidbits about these guys or this song?
Well, this song, it's funny because they did this song as a kind of like a screw you to the man, because when they first started, the music industry actually thought, because they're rocking up in not outrageous, but in costumes and makeup, the music industry thought, oh, like these guys are just a bunch of like egotistical, they just think that they're up themselves type of thing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they brought out this song and went, you know what? Yeah, we are going to be a bit ego about it, because that's what you need to do in the music industry. And so that's why they wrote this song, and it became
It's to make it.
and is to make it, and it's it actually outranked Elton John of the time.
And the Australian charts.
Yeah, on the Australian charts. Yeah, he's their debut album, Living in the 70s. So not ego is a dirty word, but their debut album outsold Elton John in Australia in 74, which I believe
Right.
at the time would have been Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, would have been that album that came out at that time. So, and that's a massive album. Like we know the hits on that album,
It's hit after hit, isn't it?
It's hit after hit. But ego is not a dirty word. Stayed number one for 11 weeks. It was the second highest selling album in Australia in 1975. So they made a big impact on Aussie music of that era. Because before that, it was, like I said, it was bands like the Easy Beats, like all these bands that were trying to emulate the UK or the US bands of the time as well,
Yeah. Did we get a bit of disco chucked in there between 1970 and 1975? I wonder, does Australia have any disco acts?
Well,
anything that comes to mind?
disco was more late 70s. So disco kind of came out around the same time as like 77. So like you had like punk in the UK, and then in the US you had punk as well, but you also had disco in the US. So disco is more late 70s.
Early 80s.
Early
Late
80s.
70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what was going on in that period between 1970 and 1975? Like just lots of pub rock.
Yeah, lots of pub rock bands, but also just there wasn't a huge amount happening. So it was more like talent bands,
Lots of ballads.
ballads.
Lots of ballads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ballads.
Okay.
Acts, like we had like Young Talent Time and stuff like that. So
I don't know if was that going on in the 70s? I don't think so. Not the early 70s. I tell you, something that just popped to Correction Corner. Yeah, I don't know. We're going to have to get into Correction Corner on that. I don't know what the international equivalent of Young Talent Time would have been.
1971 it came out, so it was early 70s. I knew it was early 70s. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, Young Talent Time. Who gave us such artists as Tina Arena and Danny Minogue.
Yeah, that was more that's why you're thinking
That
of
was
the
the
80s.
80s.
Because that's when, but it actually started, back in 1971.
Right. Well, there was a lot of ballads in the early 70s. Right. Okay.
Yep.
Well, right. So ego is not a dirty word is kind of Australia's first foray into glam pub rock. We've got Greg on the philosophy and the psychology.
Yep.
And we've got Shirl up front, our little Chippy, ex-carpenter.
Yeah. And I think he even wore like overall, like I remember him wearing like chippy overalls, but like shirtless, but like chippy overalls. He was the only one in the band that didn't really wear makeup, where where Red and Bob, they were the makeup, and like, you know, Bob had like this big frilled neck lizard piece like that would go like right at the back of the top of his head in like this white gown, and the bass player would wear like this white suit with like this big wide brimmed white hat,
Right.
and then the drummer would wear like a Roman like they weren't even really matching. Like one was in like a white tuxedo with a white brimmed hat, and one was dressed like a lizard, and one was dressed like, I think Red was kind of dressed almost like a butterfly type thing, and the drummer was dressed like a Roman guard, like a Caesar guard type thing. And then Shirley was just like, I'm just in my chippy overalls.
Just in my chippy overalls with my shirt off underneath, so you can check out my bod, because ego is not a dirty word.
Yeah, that's it. But they opened the door for future acts. So like they were like they were like the predecessor of future acts, more like, so you know, like In Excess, Midnight Oil, Cold Chisel, like those mainstream Aussie acts that probably made it really big overseas. So, you know, our UK and American friends would know who In Excess and Midnight Oil. They're probably the two biggest ones.
They opened the door for sex appeal. They
did.
You know, they did. Yeah. You know, if we're thinking of In Excess and I'm not sure about Midnight Oil.
No, probably not
sex appeal.
No. I'd probably say, and probably not, maybe a little bit of Cold Chisel, but yeah, definitely In Excess was Michael Hutchinson definitely that frontman. Hutchins. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
not Hutchinson.
Hutchins. Yeah. Right. Okay. So should we think about why ego is not a dirty word? Let's start with...
Why is ego not a dirty word? Even though back in the 70s, everyone thought that ego was a dirty word.
Yeah, let's talk about why ego is a dirty word. Why do you think ego is a dirty word? What do we think of when someone's got ego? We sort of...
I'm gonna go really layman's terms here. If someone who thinks they just think they're up themselves, yeah, you're a bit up yourself, mate.
You're a bit up
yourself.
And that's a very Aussie thing to say, isn't it? Up yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, what would that translate to our international audience? You know, you're a bit full of yourself. You think far too highly of yourself. What you think of yourself, you think really highly of yourself, but yet, you know, your skill or your prowess or your status is a bit lower than you actually think of yourself. So when we look at you professing to be something, and your thoughts about yourself are quite high, but yet the reality of what we see doesn't match, and there's a disparity between your perception of yourself, which is quite conflated and very not inflamed, but it's, you know, it's big. So if there's a disparity, if there's a disparity between what you say you are and what we see, what's the resulting feeling? What do we feel about someone who does that? I don't know. Have you got an answer?
I just think they're up themselves. I'm just like, oh, this person's a bit much. Like,
yeah,
you know. What do you got to what are you trying to prove here? Like, are you trying to outdo me? Outdo one? You know, it's almost like one-upping someone, I guess, is what you would think, like ego, you know, or big noting yourself, or like, you know, puffing your chest out, going, I'm the greatest here, and everyone else around me is nothing.
Right. And I think we get a bit disgusted by that. I think that's the primary feeling. I think the primary feeling is disgust when you can't see, you know, when you can't perceive yourself in a real way, when you can't step outside of yourself and look at yourself and potentially see what other people see, when you present this inflated version of yourself to the world, it's just a bit disgusting. You're a bit out of touch. I think when we look upon that, we feel a bit disgusted, and that, you know, that kind of might lead me to think about a inflated ego as sort of a bit of narcissism, right? So when we say the word "you've got a big ego," basically, is it that we're sort of diagnosing people with narcissism?
Yeah, put your ego back in check. I remember someone saying that once. Yeah, put your ego back in check.
Right? And when we're thinking about that kind of ego that needs to be put in check, I think we're sort of thinking about a grandiose sort of narcissism, like a very overt narcissism. And there are different types of narcissism, but when you sort of think about that overt narcissism, it's that sort of dominant, domineering, maybe attention-seeking, overt arrogance, that, grand self-importance, and, maybe lacking a bit of empathy, I suppose. That sort of, that overly charming, but it feels a little bit disconnected from reality, right?
And a
Does
bit
that
fake.
check out?
Yeah, and a little bit fake.
A little bit fake. It's like, yeah, it's a bit fake because from the outsider looking in at the overt narcissist, the grandiose narcissist, we're like, surely that can't be real. Surely you can't see yourself. Surely you can't believe that about yourself, or surely that's not real.
Surely you can't be
So
serious. I am, and don't call me
surely
Shirley.
you can't be serious, right?
I am, and don't call me Shirley.
What was that? Airplane or flying
Airplane.
high?
Well,
Airplane?
in America it was called airplane, but internationally it was called flying high.
There you go.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting that we have said, surely you can't be serious. I am, and don't call me Shirley. As in
That's it.
Shirley Strawn. Boom, boom.
Hey, da-dum-ts. But I think in this context, we're talking about ego.
A different kind of ego.
Well, in a negative form, and I think there are two types. You can have positive ego and you can have negative ego.
Negative ego. You're correct. Yeah. And I think what maybe the songwriters take on it is like, hey, you guys are uneducated and all you understand about ego is that it could be related to grandiose narcissism, which is where we see people who are, competitive, who regulate their self-esteem by inflating themselves and putting others down. They sort of seek admiration and validation constantly, and they struggle with being sort of curious about other people. They make it all about them.
Yeah. Which I think Skyhooks has done that. Like they've turned the negative but into satire. So they've almost they've made a negative into a satirical positive.
They've made it ironic.
Well, that's true. Because
they've created irony.
You and I, we didn't grow up in the 70s, but from what history shows us is that, the 60s was very conservative, coming out of the war in the 50s. It was like, okay, we got to get back on track. Everyone stay in your lane. Everyone don't make a fuss. Just, everyone have white picket fences. Everyone get up at the same time. Everyone go to work at the same time. Everyone come home at the same time. And I think that transferred a little bit. It was dying off in the 70s, but I think it also transferred in the 70s. And being Australians, we were a bit behind. We were. They say 20 years behind the rest of the world. I wouldn't say we were 20 years behind, but
maybe 10. But
10 years. Like little things like colour TV. We brought out colour TV in 1975, where America had colour TV in the late 60s, like in the 60s already. Stuff like that. So I think what the Skyhooks are saying is that you're all saying ego is a dirty word because you're all kind of stuck in the norm where we want to say it's not a dirty word and it's okay to be a little bit let's say left wing or a bit of left of field.
Right, because in the 70s it was all about repression, and it was all about cutting down anyone who stood out, right? Like it was a national pastime to this thing we have in Australia, and I don't know what you would call it internationally, is like tall poppy syndrome. Like we did really make it a national sport to try to cut people down who stood out from the crowd. So we were socially in the 70s, we were telling people, don't individuate, don't be an individual, repress yourself, blend in, don't be anything other than compliant. And so this song is a bit of a middle finger salute to,
It is.
to what was going on socially. It was that it was fighting the system. It was trampling all over the system, dancing on top of it in heels and makeup.
Yeah, that's it. In high, what are they? Platform boots.
Platform boots.
Platforms were the big thing of the 70s. Everyone wore platform boots.
Correct.
Yeah.
So.
And it paved the way, and people were like, "Oh, I can relate to this." Like, I'm sure there were lots. And look, our listeners who are from the 70s, please let us know in the comments if you want. It probably went, "Oh, I finally got some," like, as you said, as teenagers. "Oh, I finally got something I can relate to that no one else understands or get." Like,
that I don't want to be a sheep. I don't want to be sheeple. I want to stand out. I want to express myself, and I want to be able to show the world my authentic self and what's inside of me, rather than just thwarting my self-expression and, being afraid to admit my feelings, and that, I wanted to back that up with some sassy eyeliner.
Yeah, that's right. And their next album after Ego is Dirty is quite funny. Is the album's called Straight in a Gay World, which is the complete opposite. And their album cover is a black sheep. So once again, the satiricalness of it, I think that's
the satire
great.
of it all.
Yeah.
Yes. That's really interesting, isn't it? So straight in a gay world and a black sheep.
Yeah, on a white album cover. Yeah.
On a white album cover.
Just because you were mentioning, let's not be sheep. Let's, and they probably they flipped that on its head.
They really have. Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting that they've, that they're kind of centering on irony as their shtick.
Yeah.
And right. Okay. So I think that this song, if we're kind of looking at types of narcissism, this is really a song about healthy narcissism, right? Like healthy and adaptive narcissism is like finding that really balanced, a realistic rather than a fake. You were talking about fake earlier. So a realistic sort of sense of self-worth and confidence and a self-respect to unapologetically show your true self. Like this healthy adaptive narcissism is about kind of knowing your value, having good self-esteem,
confidence.
Which will allow confidence, which allows you to take up space and to assert boundaries and to have that confidence, like you say, without entitlement, to have pride in your accomplishments and to have healthy ambition. So the Skyhooks are standing up on stage and they're saying we are unapologetic about our worth, but we don't feel superior. We're not, which would sort of really be like what a vulnerable, fragile narcissist might do. They might try to develop a sense of superiority. That the grandiose narcissist as well. But Skyhooks are saying, no. There is a healthy level of ego here where we can we can take up space in the world. And I think particularly in the 1970s, mid-1970s Australia, we were telling people to shrink, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We were telling people to, especially, you know, women, you know, queer folks, LGBT community, anyone who was creative, we were saying, stop it, stop shrinking. And the Skyhooks are saying, no, we're not shrinking. We're going to present you with a glamorous disco mirror ball of defiance and survival of our authentic selves.
That's it. Well, like they say, you know, people keep their ego in the bottom drawer. So even the ones telling them to, no, you can't do that. They're keeping their ego in the bottom drawer. So they know that they've got ego, but they're trying to prove to everyone else. They're suppressing. So then what do?
Yeah.
Had to get drunk to walk out that door. So then they turn to alcohol, because what does alcohol make you do? Liquid courage. What does liquid courage give you? Egotism.
Ego, right? So they're saying, we see you, we're clocking you. We know that your ego's in the drawer, and we know that your ego and your healthy sense of adaptive narcissism can only come out with a bit of social lubricant known as alcohol.
Yeah. So they're telling, it's great. They're telling the man, we don't like your negative ego. We're selling positive ego.
We're selling positive ego, because if I didn't have positive ego, right, like the lyric says, if I didn't have an ego, I would not be here tonight.
That's right.
It's really saying, if I didn't have an ego, I wouldn't have booked the gig. I wouldn't have, you know, convinced you guys to come. I wouldn't have, my ego is a driving force. Yeah. My ego is a real driving force.
You're nothing without it.
You're nothing without your ego. Yeah. And I think they...
healthy ego. You're nothing without a healthy ego.
And listen, there is a little bit of a controversial line that comes into it. They say, and if Jesus had an ego, he'd still be alive today. Ooh, what's the hot take on that? They've brought in the JC. They've brought in the big guy.
Well,
what are they saying there?
They say, well, because obviously, you know, we're going to get a little bit religious here. Jesus was very selfless, so ego didn't exist in he was just very forth-loving and very selfless to everyone around him. So ego didn't even exist in his mind, because if it did, he would be a little bit more selfish and
a little bit more boundaried.
People wouldn't go, oh, he's a little bit left of field. Let's get rid of him, you know.
So what they're saying is martyrdom does not work. Like if you don't examine your sense of self-sacrifice, then that's going to lead to annihilation, and you're going to be kaput.
Yeah.
So this is really I suppose what they're saying is, well, they're just using Jesus as a metaphorical model, but they're saying, you know, if you're a people pleaser, you're going to burn out.
That's right. If you're the yes man,
Yeah, right. He didn't, apparently, I think what they're saying maybe is that Jesus didn't die for our sins. He died because he didn't have boundaries. He didn't have a healthy ego or sense of self-esteem to say.
Or confidence to go.
Or confidence to say, stop it.
Yeah. Please don't put me on the cross. Not today.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, this is all about healthy narcissism, really. And, you know, it differs a little bit from sort of Freud's kind of take on the ego. I mean, Freud talked about the ego in terms of the, it's not different. It sits in Freud's sort of structure of the ego, the structural model of the ego, where, you know, he posited, I think I've talked about this in other episodes, so I won't bore you all, but, you know, there's 3 parts to ourselves, really, which is, you know, we've sort of got we've got the id, you know, which is kind of this this unfettered internal childlike gremlin part that's impulsive, emotional, and sort of wants what it wants right now, you know. It just runs on what Freud called the pleasure principle.
Or in layman's terms, having a tantrum.
Having a little tantrum.
Having a tantrum.
It's all about those basic drives, you know, hunger, lust, rage, pleasure. It's all about those primal concerns.
But Daddy, I want it now. I want it now.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, Freud posits that we've also got this super ego, which is like kind of the overlord, the policeman, you know, the psyche, which kind of reads the riot act and the rule book to the id when it wants what it wants. And it's like your internalized sort of moral compass, and it judges you. Sometimes that can be a bit overactive. And then the poor sucker in the middle is the ego, right? Modulating between these two parts of ourselves. But the ego, you know, that's this sort of peacemaker between the two parts. It will bring in a little bit of the superego's high standards, but also dealing with reality and dealing with the needs of the id. And so when we're talking about healthy narcissism is saying, well, you know, you can wear your platform boots and your makeup on stage and let in a little bit of the id and its desire for attention and you know, and we can in a healthy way sort of push back against the oppression of the social norms, because being in a rock band, on a stage, in a pub, expressing these parts of ourselves isn't going to hurt anyone. In fact, it might actually invite other people in to express themselves in the same way, rather than keeping their egos in the bottom drawer and needing a social lubricant like alcohol to let the ego out.
That's it.
So that's in the way of Freud's structural model of the ego, where we've got, you know, the actual healthy adult ego letting in a bit of the id and the super ego to provide us with a situation of constructive and safe self-expression.
I love it. Love it.
Which is what Skyhooks have modelled to us, and we can all learn a thing or two from Skyhooks. You can make the repressed, you know, overlord social norms. You can make some good. You know, you can be ironic about that. You can. You can comment on it, and you don't have to accept it.
That's right. And I think it's still very relevant 50 years today. Like it's one of those songs that like it still stands.
Oh my God, you just reminded me of how old I am.
50 years. Yeah. Just past 50 years actually. Because we're in June.
Past 50 years. Yeah.
And it still stands. You know, you can listen to it now and like, oh yeah, it's still relevant. It's still very relevant today.
It's relevant. I wonder what our younger listeners might think of it. Watch the YouTube video, team, and chuck us a comment on your thoughts about, does it look old? Does it feel old? Does it stand the test of time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this next episode is a good contrast, because the next episode that we're doing is more recent, but has quite relatable themes.
Has a couple of similar themes. Yeah. I think it's one to stay tuned for.
And this artist is also locally homegrown in our lovely town of Melbourne, Victoria. So these two episodes are our local artists.
The Aussie contingent. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hit us up in the comments. Let us know your thoughts about Aussie music and about Skyhooks and ego is not a dirty word. And
hey, it's Saturday.
And hey, it's Saturday. Oh, God. That's such a social...
I'm going to throw something in before we end the episode. Yours truly had his 5 minutes fame on Hey Hey It's Saturday. That's all I'll say.
Stop it. Okay, you're going to have to tell me more about that off air.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
sure did. I'm still trying to find the footage. I was maybe 12 years old.
Right.
Maybe 11. I
Okay,
think
all
I was
right.
very, very young. It was late 90s.
Over in the studios at Nunawading?
Yep.
Oh, my. Okay, that's a suburb of Melbourne, team, where one of our
I think it was Richmond.
television...
Wasn't there Channel 9 studios in Richmond? It was in Richmond.
Oh, what was in Nunawading then? There was some in Nunawading. Anyway, that's for us to discuss off air, I think.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do some bonus content of me telling the story of being on Hey Hey It's Saturday for my 5 minutes of fame.
I think so. I think the people will love it, AJ. So...
Yeah.
Well, with that, let's sign off from Skyhooks. Ego is not a dirty word, and we will. You'll hear us on our next episode of Songs on the Couch.
Songs on the Couch.
All right. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Songs on the Couch. We hope you enjoyed putting today's song under the microscope with us.
And hey, the conversation doesn't have to end here. Join us over on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Just search Songs on the Couch, where we're sharing behind-the-scene clips, more fun music insights, and of course, chatting with you all.
And if you're an artist, musician, psychologist, counsellor, psychotherapist, or know someone who'd love to sit on the couch with us, have your management reach out. We'd love to hear from you at hello@songsonthecouch.com.
Follow us, subscribe, and let's keep rocking out together. Catch you next time on Songs on the Couch.